Hello, and welcome to another day of English 2. I am your online facilitator, Miss Abear. Today, we are looking at a new unit. As you remember, last week we finished up our unit on Notice and Note close reading strategies. Today, we are looking at a personal narrative unit from Common Lit. And a little disclosure, it's not really a personal narrative unit. The unit is a coming of age unit, but the midterm is a personal narrative. So we're going to look at the personal narrative piece first before we move too far forward. So a little instruction on your personal narrative unit and how to access the resources. So if your teacher or whoever's in your classroom will go to the commonlit.org website and sign up for a free account for teachers, they will have to make sure that they are that they can verify that they work for a school. Now, this will keep the security and the privacy of this online program. But once they are in Common Lit, if they will go to the welcome page and look at the Common Lit 360 curriculum. Once they're on that 360 curriculum, they'll go to the next screen will take them to, it says less planning, more teaching, and they will click on the grade level. We are in grade level 10 because this is English 2. And once they choose that, the very first unit that comes up says Unit 1, Coming of Age. So we're going to kind of get a little introduction to that today. So the first essential question are, what experiences lead us from childhood into adulthood? And the culminating essay at the very end of the unit says, write an essay in which you explain your perspective on what it means to come of age and how we become adults. Use evidence from multiple texts and your own experiences to support your argument. So as you can see, at the end of this task, it does say an argument. So before we get too involved in this, I want you to think about these big questions that are coming up, that will be coming up. And these are not actually questions, they're statements. But I want you to work with your shoulder partner or someone next to you and talk about these big ideas that we will be exploring in this unit. And think about what this means to you and what your thoughts are on this. So, do you believe it's better to listen to your friends rather than adults? Do you believe that you have to take risks to figure out who you are? Do you believe that people from different backgrounds can have strong relationships? Do you believe it's worth being in love even if you get your feelings hurt? Do you believe that we are defined by our past experiences? So take a second and talk with your shoulder partner about that. All right, so let's share out. What statements did you agree most with? And then what statements did you most disagree with? So have that discussion out loud now with your teacher. All right, next we're going to look at what we will be reading during this unit, and this will be the entire unit, not just the part for the personal narrative. So the title of the first text is Safety of Numbers by Lucy Tan. The next one is a informational text, Growing Up Key Moments. Then we will read another short story called Through the Tunnel. And then there are some letters that we will explore that the title of that text is John F. Kennedy Inspired Us Then and Now. We'll read another short story called American History, and another short story called Eraser Tattoo. And then the last short story is called Marigolds by Eugenia Collier. So I promised you that we will do a personal narrative. So as our mid-unit task or our midterm, we will be exploring this idea. Write a personal narrative describing an experience that has been part of your transition out of childhood. When deciding on a moment to write about, consider the following: a loss you experienced, a realization or difficult truth that you learned, a new responsibility that you had to take on, or a risk that you decided to take. So we're going to be coming back to this idea of this personal narrative and the end of the unit task For every single text that we read and every day that we meet, we will go over the end of the unit task as well as the personal narrative to remind you of what your tasks will be. But today, we're going to do a brief introduction to the vocabulary for Activity 1. So, you should have in your resource packet a page that looks like this. It says Vocabulary for Unit 1, Coming of Age. You will need it and a pencil to work on this activity. So what we're going to do, sometimes when you're reading and you encounter words that you don't know, without a dictionary, how can we find the meaning of those words? Well, we use, and you should know this, we use context clues. And the way that we use context clues is we look at the context around the word that we're trying to define. And so we're going to practice this skill today. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at context clues to predict the meaning of a word. And so in your packet, you will see this photograph. We're going to use some photographs in order to help us define what these words mean. So the first one says, Beth was so angry at her brother, she had a difficult time being civil at the dinner table. So we're going to try to figure out what the word civil means. I'm going to begin by looking at the photograph, and I'm going to ask myself, what do I see? Well, I see two girls smiling and appearing to be nice to each other. And so here is the sentence at the bottom of the paragraph. Anika and Gabriella had a disagreement over the project they were working on, but they learned to be civil to one another. So we're looking at the entire context. We're looking at the photograph as well as the sentence. So looking at that, I'm going to try to decide, what does it mean to be civil? Well, I think it could mean friendly, or it could mean respectful. So if you look at, like, again, they're smiling, they look to be having a good conversation. Someone snapped that photograph. Were they just pretending? So I'm not 100% certain, but I think looking at this, if I look at the beginning of the statement, it says that they had a disagreement, but they learned to be civil. So I'm going to think that the word civil is probably the most useful word in that statement. So I'm going to write down the word respectful. So later we're going to look at what the dictionary says, or the correct definition, but for now we're going to just look at the word respectful. Now, I want you to take a second and go through some of the other pieces of this, of your packet. The next one is for the word conscious. So think about that word conscious, and I want you to turn to your neighbor and talk about what you think that word might mean based on the context of the photograph as well as the caption. All right, so I need a volunteer to describe what you see in the photograph. Okay, I need another volunteer to suggest a word or words that could be used in place of the underlined word conscious. Great job. All right, next let's look at the example sentence. The example sentence said, Raymond was conscious of his daughter's musical talent and always tried to encourage it. All right, so I want you to see if you can fill out the caption into this sentence to see if it works. Those words that you just shouted out. See if those words fit in that sentence. All right. Good job. All right. So you're going to take about 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes at the longest to predict the definitions for the rest of the vocabulary words. I'm going to circle around while you're working and review some of your predictions, and then we'll come back together. All right, you've had your 7 minutes, and if your teacher needed to give you some additional minutes, I'm sure he or she did. So let's review what these words mean so that you can complete your packet for today. The first word that we looked at was contribute. That's the one that you did by yourself. So when I go through this review, you're going to write the correct definition in that blank at the bottom of each picture. So the first one was civil. That was the very first word that we went over. So we said that it could mean polite and respectful. So some other synonyms for that might be civilian or civility. I'm sorry, those are related words. So has that same root word of civil. Next, conscious means to be aware of something or aware of one's surroundings. Then you started working on your own. So the next word is contrite. Contrite means feeling or expressing guilt, regret, or remorse. All right, the next word was defiance. And that means disobedience or resistance to someone else's wishes. You should have been able to find some synonyms for that. Hopefully you did. If you will write that definition on your packet. Next was futile, means pointless, unable to produce any useful result. The next word was hierarchy. It is a system of ranking groups of people, one above the other. The next word was idealism, and that's extreme hopefulness or belief in something, especially when it's unrealistic. Next was innocence. This should be a no-brainer for you guys. Lack of worldly experience, lack of guilt or evil intention. I bet you didn't think about that second part of that definition when you thought about the word innocence, but it is something to consider. The next word was tenacious. It means very weak or not substantial. So you should have had a minute to work over the rest of those definitions. And if you didn't get those definitions, this PowerPoint will be available to your teacher so she can go back and forth and pause when she needs to with that information. So over the rest of this unit, your teacher will work with you to work some more on this packet of materials that you will have to help you dig deeper into the words and their meanings using the context as they come up in the stories that we read. That is the end of today in our introduction to this unit. I hope that you're looking as forward to this as I am. And until next time, happy reading.